waiting for this day to come when I get a chance to talk to the friend of mine, Dr. Kenrick Semple, who I have known a long time before he went down the road of science. And we were like in church together, and all of a sudden he started to pursue greater things. I know he had aspiration when he was much younger. I didn't know where his dreams and aspiration would have taken him, but now I know where it took him, and I am very happy to have him joining me on this very, very special evening where we want to talk about so many important things in the time that we are. So, welcome, Dr. Semple. Good to have you with me this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bishop. And it's really nice to be here with you.
It's been a pleasure. So, it's nice to have you, man. I am proud to have known you for all these years, and one never know when people come into your life what they're there for and what the end result and the long-term benefit, blessings or curse might be. This one we consider to be blessing that after maybe 20 years or 20 plus years. We kind of lost trace of each other, kind of, and I run into you in a convention a couple of years ago, and now who would have thought that we would have been at this point now to be talking to you on your profession as it becomes necessary to right where we are. So tell those who are listening, those who don't know Kenrick Semple, something about Kenrick Semple.
All right. Yeah, so my name is Kenrick Semple, and if I can start from maybe high school. So in high school, I was a science major, and I always had the interest in medicine. And so immediately after high school, I started college, the local college at the University of Guyana. And I pursued it was an associate degree. At the time, it was called a diploma in medical technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time, I wasn't even sure what medical technology was. And even now, the term is just used like that. More recently, it has been modified to be a clinical laboratory scientist. So that at least gives folks a little more information as what it is. So it's basically someone who works in a lab and does blood testing from the simple, maybe a blood sugar, to maybe cholesterol, and even a blood type.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what I've been doing since I left high school. So after that, I worked 1 year in my native Guyana, and then I migrated to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and that is when our paths crossed.
Yeah, that's when we ran into each other, and we were hanging out at the same place for a while.
For a while, exactly, and I worked at the local hospital in Kingstown,
right?
A very lovely place, St. Vincent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually stayed there for almost 4 years working in the laboratory. So after a while, I decided to pursue further studies in the United States. So I came as a student, and I pursued studies in medical technology. I attended a college in Texas. So there I completed my studies, and then I started working in Florida. I worked for a short while, and then I moved up to Maryland. I just wanted to have American experience, I guess, in Florida is much like
state to state. I see that here.
Yes. And so I worked in Maryland for a while, and there I pursued a master's degree in medical and research technology. And I at that time, I became a specialist in blood banking. And so I worked there for almost 5 years. And then I just wanted a change. I became a lead technologist on my shift. And so I decided to go into research. And that took me back to Florida. And that's when I started pursuing a PhD in medical sciences at the University of South Florida, in allergy, immunology, and infectious diseases.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, go ahead.
So being there in the medical sciences, in order to complete the PhD, we had to do research. And so that is when I started doing actual research.
Mm-hmm.
And so my project, because I had the background in immunology, I chose a topic on bone marrow transplantation. And I'm going to explain a little without becoming too scientific what exactly it was.
Before you go, and that's going to be interesting because I've always been fascinated by just the term the bone marrow transplant and all of that kind of stuff. So to help those of us who are not as scientific and not as biologically inclined in like you are, to get an understanding of what does that mean. Somebody say a bone marrow transplant.
Yeah, right. So there are some diseases where it's most times we might say, well, a cancer of the blood. For example, like leukemia or lymphoma, when some cells, for example, just start multiplying and going out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And the only treatment at that stage is to replace the person's bone marrow. So what happens is that there's a donor, and they would have to do like a match to make sure that it's a perfect match, so they wouldn't have different rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And the person is given a new set of bone marrow, and these cells just start growing within the person, and the person can live a normal life. And so what happens is that there is this side effect. It might be a perfect match, but then there's a condition that's called graft versus host disease, where the graft, and that's the bone marrow that's given from the donor, actually starts acting against the host.
Mm-hmm.
And so the aim of my project, the focus was basically to see how you can prevent the development of this graft versus host disease. And so we were doing all these experiments with the use of a cell that's called T regulatory cells.
Mm-hmm.
And all these research, all these studies were done in mice.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
you said, and that's a good question to ask, because how closely related are mice with human? Because most of these research are done in mice, and then they move on based on what they have found in mice. Now they move on to human because they have some feeling of accomplishment, like, okay, this one really works. How close is the relationship in terms of the findings in the mice and how it affects the human?
Yeah, so there are similarities. And that's why they are used continually. There are similarities in terms of what's found, like the genetic material in the mice, and then even larger animals. Like, for example, and this is a little, I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself, but let's say in drug development, they would start out maybe like in the lab using the cell lines, and then they would move to like rodents. And at the same time, you would have to have like a non-rodent species as well. And so they do have relevance, and they do have similarities. And so that's why they continue.
I would imagine, but I was always curious about, move from mice to man, that's like a jump, but the genetic makeup maybe have some factors that can correlate, in the sense of, we find if the mice survive it, or if it affect the mice this way, then it will affect human in similar ways, etc.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting, man. I appreciate your journey. And those who are just joining us, I have with me Dr. Kenrick Semple, somebody that I've known a long time, before he took on all these heavy scientific discoveries. Research came down later on in his life, and I am so happy to have him joining with me. So, following up on your role, and I'm asking the question now, your role as a scientist and a Christian, how do you strike the balance? Because some people think science and and theology and science don't have nothing in common. So how does a Christian man compare science and or balance both?
Both, yes, and that's a very interesting idea. And as you started asking the question, my mind went to Luke in the Bible, because Luke was mentioned as a physician.
He was a physician indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not to say that the Christians should only be fishermen or so on, to say that, but it's just like as people grow and they have different things that they like, and they choose different fields. And so me being a scientist, I think, has allowed me not only to see things differently, but to be analytical. Of course, I cannot bring the same kind of reasoning to understand things of God or spiritual things, if we think of it like that. But certainly there is a place for scientists and science in the body of Christ.
Right.
I think in all walks of life, we have seen how science has really affected humans throughout time. As I was preparing for this, I just thought of, and I know we'll get to vaccines, but I was just thinking about some of the other vaccines that we have become to use, and they're almost so routine that we sometimes can forget that it's the work of these vaccines that actually kind of has controlled so many of like dangerous diseases.
Previous diseases that,
Right, yeah.
we have known and have come far beyond them killing us every day. So that's a good point as you're making that point, because before we even get to the COVID vaccine, which is where everybody's mind, where our minds are right now, it's a good time to reflect, to bring us back to that vaccinations are not new things.
Exactly.
And almost all of us in our lives at some point have been vaccinated.
Exactly.
Sometimes we were conscious about it, and sometimes we weren't conscious about it. We know what it was for. Sometimes we didn't know what it was for. But now, because of the COVID and because of the development, which we'll talk about later, which we really want to address that. But it's a good point. So maybe just remind us of some of the major diseases or pandemics that we have faced, that we made it to this point because of vaccination or vaccine.
Exactly. Right. And like for example, a few that come to mind, like polio and measles, tetanus and diphtheria. Those are all conditions that are controlled because of the different vaccinations. I don't remember. I think like maybe it's until about 12 or 13. I remember like for a child to be vaccinated, they go to the clinic different times.
Oh yeah.
Just so that they don't develop these vaccines. However, I want to mention that recently, maybe like within the last 5 to 10 years or so, there's been this movement with folks who are described as anti-vaxxers, who just, for whatever reason, they don't want to be vaccinated. But it's only after them that some of these diseases actually start to reemerge in our society. But vaccines have controlled these diseases for years.
So you're implying that some of these pandemics, or some of these that have progressed among us, maybe stem from the anti-vaxxers, who maybe disease developed within their communities, and they refuse to be vaccinated, so it continues to spread, and now it moves to becoming pandemics.
Right. Well, not referring to like the COVID-19, but like in the United States, for example, like measles.
Right.
I know for sure in a few states, I think of California, where they had a few cases of measles, and those were traced back to people who were not vaccinated.
They were not vaccinated.
Yes, right, they were not. You're right, they were not.
They contracted the disease.
Right, yeah, and so they contracted it. Yes, right.
All right, I hear you. All right, so coming to the COVID thing I just want to welcome all my friends and your friends and brothers and sisters, neighbors from everywhere who have joined us on Facebook, on YouTube. We want to appreciate you and thank you. And if you hang around at the end, we maybe give you a chance that you can ask Dr. Semple a couple of questions. You can type it into somewhere, and then I could maybe ask the question. If you submit the question, we'll ask him the question later on. Let me just say right off the top here, there is no way. The amount of things that I want to talk to this scientist about, there is absolutely no way we can do it in one meet. So this is considered to be part one. So keep your eyes open for part two, because there's definitely going to be a part. There's so many things that I want to talk to him about. And just to give you a hint, we're going to talk about syphilis on the next time. So that's just to give a hint that one of what we want to talk about. So hang in there. All right. So tell me, as I said to you before we came live, that the perception has been there. And one of the reasons one of the reasons why, before we even get to the inequities, one of the reasons why some people are so reserved of even taking the vaccine is that they don't trust the development of it. One, in my opinion, it has been apparently politicized, or it has been believed to be politicized. And so people don't trust the production of it because they think it came from it was politically driven. So they think it just skim off the top and without proper development and research and culmination of whatever might make it a good vaccination or
Yeah.
vaccine. So tell us a little about the development of it.
Right, and that is a very fair assessment. That is a very fair assessment, and I think that's why the scientists, it's like their role to really educate the public about what exactly is happening or what exactly has happened. And it's not like if the new technology of the RNA or the messenger RNA vaccine is something that just came about 9 months ago. And
Right.
so, in doing some research, I think it's probably about a decade ago when we had the Ebola outbreak, and then we had SARS.
Right.
And after these pandemic, it's like medical science started to develop these newer technologies of developing a vaccine. And this technology of messenger RNA, mRNA vaccine was one of them. And so they've been working on this new technology for a while. And so they've done a lot of the groundwork before in terms of how this vaccine can actually work. And so with the coming of this new pandemic now, they didn't really have to start from scratch. They already had the technology there. And I guess at one time I'll kind of, in a simplified way, just kind of describe, like what really was involved. So as soon as they got the genetic information, they were able to just start. And so here we are. After 9 months, we have a vaccine.
So I appreciate that, and I just want to emphasize, as you said, that the people who believe that this vaccine has been completely developed in 9 months do not have the facts. So help us to understand, as you said, 10 years ago, and I've heard that 9, 10 years ago, since they have been tracing COVID, diseases that there is not new. I remember when they come with the COVID-19, and some people were showing Lysol bottles and saying, hey, they're talking about this develop, and look at this, COVID has been around, but their motive of saying that is to downplay this virus and to say this is not new and somebody's creating this one. So they think that they're creating this one for different reasons. But what I have known, and I'm getting your conversation on that, is that this foundation of preparing, like you said, the technology has been advanced and they have developed the basics, the fundamentals. In other words, for a building terminology, they have laid the foundation, and just now to determine what size or where they put columns or etc. etc. So having done that already, it makes it easy
Right.
to figure out what will affect or what will work with this virus.
Right, exactly.
Ease the mind of some who think this was developed too quick, because as the president was saying that, it would have been 10 years and 13 years, but we got it done in a few months. So that got into the minds of people that this has been developing over a few months.
Right, and that's a very important point to know. It's like I remember it was probably about almost 30 years ago when I started college, like my very first microbiology class, and we were learning about vaccines, and of course that was a traditional way, and it was like you use and I always remember this word, attenuated, and this is a word that just means to make less powerful, to take away the effect. And that's how they created vaccines first, where you had to get whatever germ, whether virus or bacteria, that would be attenuated, and then that would be given in the vaccine, and that is what would cause the body to develop that immune response. And so what has happened, so it's like that technology takes a very long time. You have to get the actual virus and you have to get it attenuated and to work with to make it into a vaccine. So because that took so long, they developed this technology where something that's called the mRNA, which stands for messenger RNA. And the role of that, it's basically to create protein. It's like the one that in science we say protein synthesis, or in other words, to make a protein. So what happens is like it carries around what is called like the genetic material or a genetic code or the instructions. Right. And so this vaccine now that is given, it just has the information, and it basically tells the cells in the body or teaches the cells how to make the protein. And so once that is done, the body then just starts developing the immune response. So whenever or if we are exposed, we already have that immune response that we can take care of the virus. And so because of that, I would just mention, like I just heard, I think it was the Moderna, where they're saying that they're already working on modifying the vaccine to the point where it can take care of the different variants.
The different variants, right?
So you see, because of the technology, because the technology is much easier to manipulate than having the actual virus, the actual attenuated germ. So that's what makes it so much different.
And what causes this, or part of what causes this to come to the maturity or the fruition or come to the effect of it, is because the scientists have been steps ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
Have been steps ahead. So as you talk a couple of times about the mRNA, and there was something circulating about this mRNA thing, and people, this propaganda, this conspiracy stuff was sending around that this mRNA, and they have their own theory on it. And they say, be careful of this, because if you take it, or if you take the vaccination, if you take the vaccine, and it gets into your system and it begins to negatively affect you, there is no way you can get any remedy or anything to help. And they were suggesting it will affect you in certain way, like Down syndrome, and you can't get past it. So that's one of the theory that was going around. And when people hear all these things, it tend to resonate in their minds.
Right. Yeah. So it's a long list of what I would call like misinformations and things that are not true, and things that scientists would need to explain for people really to understand. Because if we understand how the mRNA works, it's like it takes the genetic information in terms of instructions and tells the cells how to process proteins. So that's what it's doing. It's not involved in, let's say, DNA or like the germ cell. Like, for example, as you said, Down syndrome. Down syndrome would be something that's determined way before, like in the germ cell. It's something that can't be manipulated, like after birth, like that. So sometimes people have a lot of misunderstandings, and then they just throw this information out there, and it just catches on like wildfire, and the misinformation is out there.
I agree with you. It's like germs. As I said time and again, no one can catch health from somebody.
Well, yeah.
You can catch germ.
Germ. Yeah. Right.
And so germ spreads,
right. Yeah.
But health don't really spread. You have to deliberately take active steps to create a healthy environment. But boy, you just come across somebody and you could contract a germ, and then and I think just false information spreads pretty quickly, and because we are so gullible, and sometimes it feed into our own thinking, then it justifies we expanding on it. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm talking to Dr. Kenrick Semple, a scientist, and tell us what your key profession really is. because and by the way, let me just say, and we should have said this at the beginning, that Dr. Kenrick Semple actually works at the FDA while he is not speaking on the behalf of the FDA, now representing the FDA, but his background goes. That's where he has some deep scientific skill that even cause him to be working at that level.
Right. And so, for example, like if I go back to my training, my PhD training, so it's a PhD in medical sciences. And at the University of South Florida, what they have done is like they have developed, they tend to think of it as trying to have the person not just focused on one area, but you can be almost multifaceted. So it's a degree in medical sciences, but then there is a concentration, whether it's immunology, infectious disease, or molecular medicine. And so we had that opportunity to basically have like a wide array of training in different areas. Right now, like my focus is more on pharmacology. That's what I do like day to day. So it's all so different. And at the same time, I would mention that I have consistently worked as a blood bank technologist, medical technologist. So I still actually work as a medical technologist. So I'm classified as a healthcare worker as well.
All right. So again, thanks, my friends who are watching from wherever you're watching. If in a little bit from now, we give you a chance to type a question, and I'll ask Dr. Semple to respond. But I'll tell you when you can type a question if you have one. And let me just remind those who are watching and listening on radio and who are watching on Facebook and on YouTube, that this is part one of my meeting, because there is so many things that I really want to talk to my friend about that we can never combine it in one night. So keep your eyes out looking when I have part two coming up with Dr. Kenrick Semple. I appreciate you, man, and your knowledge is really helping us right here as we speak. So tell us about the COVID now, the COVID vaccine, before we go into the inequities and the other development that are in development process now. Tell us about the COVID, because this is the COVID virus itself, and then we look at the vaccine.
Right. Yes. And so right now we have two vaccines that have been, they're not approved. Okay, I have to be careful with this here. They've received what is called the emergency use authorization.
Right.
They call it like the EUA. So what this means is that there aren't any approved vaccine, and when there isn't any approved treatment, the FDA can actually grant these authorizations. So this is what happens with these two vaccines, one from Pfizer and the other one from Moderna. And so it's basically like, we don't have anything, but this is the best we have. While the testing is still ongoing, this is the best we have. And so they have authorized it. They have looked at all the information that was submitted. And for those who are taking the vaccine, of course, they give them that information so that they would know that, look, it's not an FDA approved product, but it's a product that has been authorized under emergency use.
And so what I wanted to say. Okay, so the other thing for those who are skeptical, and we didn't know, some of us are not, some of us don't, maybe follow things so we can know the step-by-steps and understand the real legitimate argument that is being shared with the public. One of what we understand, in order to even get to the place of the emergency use authorization, these vaccines have to go through a process. They call them stage 1, 2, 3, where they have to begin to test a small amount of people, a couple thousand people, then many more thousand people, and then maybe 30, 40,000 up to how many thousand before. And then the data has to come back and to prove the efficacy,
Right.
the safety of these vaccines for them to be authorized even for emergency use.
Right.
So we want to use this program as part of helping our audience to be edified of the process of these vaccines, so that when the time comes, and let me just say, I can't wait. I can't wait for New York to have enough that my age group can come in and get mine. I'm just walking with my sleeve up, waiting to say where is the nurse or the professional who is gonna give me my number one dose. Having said that, even before we go further, just to let everybody else know that you've already taken your first dose.
Yes, I have. And so, because I'm a healthcare worker, I was offered it by my job, and I accepted. And 3 weeks ago, I got my first dose. In fact, I'm scheduled to take the second dose on Friday, 2 days from today. And
I covered you on that. I covered you on that because when the COVID came around, I was working in the hospital. I was a chaplain doing my residency in the hospital. And if I had not completed my residency before these vaccines were available, I would have already gotten mine. So but my residency finished in August, so I'm no longer in the hospital system on the front line. So I would have gotten mine maybe ahead of you. Because one of my friends who I work with, they already got their vaccination. So, but yes, let's continue to talk about that. So this is a pretty interesting conversation. So now you talk about the virus. Tell us about the COVID-19 vaccine now. What can you tell us about that?
Right. And yeah, so as I started first saying, it's like, so it has received emergency use authorization, and you were told that when you go to get it, they actually have a booklet with all the information there, and you can read. And so if I just mentioned so what is expected, like I know you alluded to that earlier in terms of the regular testing for any vaccine.
Right.
It takes a while. It's not something that's done in a short period of time. But of course, I would say several years, because of course it starts when there is basic laboratory research where you're just using cells, like the exploratory stage, and then you'll go to preclinical, where you start using animal models like the rodents, the mice or monkeys, and those take years to do, maybe like 1 to 2 years. And then you'll start going into the different phase of trials, like the phase 1. It's usually just a small, less than 100 healthy volunteers, and you're really looking for the safety of the drug and maybe the type of immune response that you would get. And then you'll move to like a phase 2, which is a little larger, several hundred individuals.
Right.
And the phase 3 is usually the largest, and it's usually thousands to tens of thousands of people and that would be involved in those. And it's basically looking for safety in a large group of people. And on average, it's about 1 to 4 years you would have. And so, of course, these vaccines have not gone through the regular long trials. And so they have received several different authorization where some of the testing can be done concurrently. But that's the way emergency use authorization works. So it's just to give people, like normally it's a longer process.
And even though some may say, well, the short process, I still don't trust it. Over a period of time, they still have to prove the efficacy and the safety of it. So a combination of both, not just that it removes or suppresses or eradicates the virus, but it doesn't negatively affect the health of the person otherwise.
Right, exactly. And what it is, it's like first, it's the safety. It's always about the safety. Like the very first study, when it's going into healthy volunteers, it's basically safety. They're not concerned at that stage whether it works or not, because it's just healthy people, and you don't want anybody dying. And then as it gets larger, they started focusing now on efficacy. It's like, okay, if I have somebody who is infected, or would this prevent infection?
Right.
Sort of, yeah. So they do. And what you mentioned now, I just want to make sure folks understand that even though a product like these products may have received the emergency use authorization, they still have to complete all the testing in order to be approved.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not like it's just like that and it's done. They have to continue to complete all the different testing.
Very interesting. I'm talking with Dr. Kenrick Semple, my friend I know for many, many years, and I am so proud. I am so proud of him that we depart St. Vincent maybe just years apart, and I pursued theology, and he went down into science, and so he's doing a lot with the body, and I'm doing soul and spirit.
Yeah.
And with body too, because so a good combination here. Although I have also done a little bit in understanding the function of the body, so I know a little bit of it. I'm just to remind my friends that after this, maybe on the top of the hour, that we will give an opportunity for, if you have a question you want to ask a question, Dr. Semple will respond as much as he's able to. But just also a reminder that this is only part one of our conversation, because I really, really want to talk about something else with him that I see mentioned here in a document that I'd really like to explore for my benefit and for yours. So we will have a part two. So make sure you're looking out for that. Let's go to so Dr. Semple, I'm looking at we have the Pfizer and the Moderna that already been come to the process, and those two use the mRNA, right? The mRNA.
Yes, mRNA.
But there is one. There are others that's using different method to develop the vaccine. For example, I think Johnson & Johnson is using something else.
Actually, I'm not sure about the technology, but what I know is that there is another one. Or I should say, I cannot say whether it's Johnson & Johnson, but I know another technology that's being used is one that's called an adenovirus vector.
Right, the adenovirus vector.
Vector, right, yes, right. But I couldn't say whether it was Johnson & Johnson, but I know there is a one which is a different technology.
Well, Johnson and AstraZeneca, they are using that one.
Okay.
Yeah, they're using that one. So Moderna and Pfizer use the mRNA, and Johnson and AstraZeneca are using the adenovirus vector. And there is also another one that's Sanofi and Novavax. There's still more that is in the pipeline that's in the development process, which we don't know if they will even get to the point where they get the emergency use authorization.
Exactly.
So far, it looked like Johnson & Johnson, based on their data,
they're getting ready to submit.
Like on the edge of breaking out. Maybe another couple of weeks, they will present their data for authorization as well. So, tell me now, before we get into the inequities, tell us about what you know about these variants. I don't know, these variants are taking over Europe and different countries. For example, the B117 that they talk about, that is in United Kingdom, and it is affecting 46 other countries. So these variants, how these variants come by, if you know.
Right. And so one thing I remember from my virology experience is that they mutate all the time. They change. And for example, like the flu vaccine that we might take, like the flu vaccine we take this year is going to be totally different from the one we take next year, because they cater for the different mutations that actually go on all the time continuously. Mm-hmm. And so what is happening as these viruses mutate like that, they have to make adjustments then. And so this newer technology with the RNA, that has given the messenger RNA vaccine technology, they now have, like, I guess an easier way of catering for the variants. Mm-hmm. I think I mentioned earlier, I think it was Moderna who was already say that they exactly know how they're gonna do modification so that so that they can so that people would be protected,
Right.
when they receive
Or
the
maybe
vaccine.
a little bit of tweaking here and then a little bit of boost later on,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. All right. I'm talking to Dr. Kenrick Semple, and this is just a fascinating conversation, and so relevant to today. All right. So let's talk about the inequities, and I want to put this out there that the most vulnerable among us are the least likely to take the vaccine. The most vulnerable are the least likely, and so we put ourselves at even further peril
Mhm.
by rejecting are not too apt or excited about getting vaccinated. Now let me just throw some data, some numbers out there, and I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that, but I'm throwing the numbers out there. It is said, we know this by what the record shows, that black people in general, African American, died most, and for different reasons, the density of their population, lack of health, for a number of factors come into that.
Mhm.
And also because of, now that the vaccine is available, they are more pride in taking it for historic reasons.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna allow you to give us a little bit of background on that, but I'm gonna give the numbers and then I'll come back. You can give us a little bit of background on some of the reasons, and sometimes justified reasons, but
Yes.
then we can't allow how all past to
Mhm.
determine our future, because we got to move from here and going forward, because where we're coming from is a history that we can learn from, but where we're going is destiny, and where we're going is more important than where we're coming from. So we got to learn from where we are and determine how we go forward. So here are the numbers.
Yes, exactly. And that's,
Per, I'm going to give the numbers and I'm going to come back to you.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
Per 100,000 people by race or ethnicity. 147 per 100,000 people. 147 African American or Black died from the COVID, or get the COVID, or die from it actually. And American Indian or Alaska Native, 138, following very close behind that.
Mhm.
When it comes to the Hispanic and Latino, it is 121. When it comes to the Hawaiian, the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, it's 110. When it comes to white, it is 98. That is almost the black is almost double, pretty
Mhm.
close to at least twice, not
Mhm.
twice, but at least one and a third of the amount that died. And when it comes to other, it's 82, and Asian 73, and I don't know what two or more races that go down to 14, what that really means. But the bottom line is the blacks and the African Americans are the most vulnerable, and we are the least likely to take the vaccine. So that means in the long run, we are going to die a lot more than everybody else for just that reason.
Yes. Yes, and that is so true. And the data is all over. It's clear as day. Anybody can go online and just check it up to see. Like NPR, the National Public Radio, was saying in August 2020 that COVID-19 death rate for blacks is twice
Hmm.
it is for whites.
Hmm.
And and of course, I know you alluded to it earlier. And a lot of this is, of course, because of pre-existing conditions. Blacks have more pre-existing conditions, and then you can trace that back. It's because of some of the inequities that are there in the society.
Hmm.
And but the thing is, as you rightfully say, we're looking back, not to stay where we are, but it's to go forward. Because
Right.
what we want to do is to change the whole picture. We want people to be educated, people to know, to have the information. Because when people know what it is, they're more likely to make better decisions because of that knowledge. And
Hmm.
so that, I think, is one reason why I am kind of motivated to share my knowledge so that people can have the information. I want to mention, like only a few days ago, everybody knows Dr. Fauci, and he had a meeting with the Black pastors in the Baltimore area.
Right.
And why he had that, it's a virtual meeting, and why he had that, he said, is that he wanted people to have the right information. And what he said, and which was really good, he acknowledged the history of the injustices. And I mean, later on, I know I wanted to mention a few of the historical things, why there is this mistrust in terms of Black Americans and medicine and research. But acknowledging that, he says, you know what? He wants the church, he wants people of faith to be the ones that can assist in just getting the right information out there. We mentioned earlier how the misinformation is so widespread,
right,
and people believe some of this thing. So if we can play a part in just giving people the right information, that can make a difference. Yeah, but the data is very clear that, as you rightfully say, Blacks are more affected, and yet they're least likely to get the vaccinations. Yeah.
I have already told my congregation, and I told it from the platform that and everybody got to make an informed decision. But as you said, knowledge is power.
Yes.
And to me, ignorance breed arrogance. And arrogance can make you do things that you would not have normally done if you were well informed. So one of the reasons I really wanted to get you on this program with me is so that we can help those in our neighborhood, in our community, in our environment, our people like you and me. You are the profession, and I and the professional, and you are right in the system, so you understand it. The other thing that I noticed that I saw the other day is that this I think it's a Moderna, if I remember. I think maybe the Moderna has some bearing on a Black woman scientist who's right at the foundation of everything about this vaccine. So once we get to know these things and get to help our people to understand that this is not from some political motivated drive and somebody want to score some political points, that this vaccine come. And I think one of the most important thing that we talk about tonight, and we'll ever help people to get an understanding of, is that this thing was not developed in 9 months as something. And especially because the president have come out so many times and said, oh yeah, we're making a record, and this is Operation Warp Speed and all of that stuff, and what they couldn't do in 5 years, or what they normally take 10 years, we get it done in 5, 6 or 7 months. And so that gets into the mind of people that they just crap this thing up and just like a microwave stuff. So to understand that this thing has been in development for 10 years or so, and now they have laid the foundation, and they just draw from that to put things together and said this and this and this should work on this kind of virus based on the traits, the strain, where stuff like that. So that's where this vaccine comes so speedily. And by the way, thank God that they've been working on it, and we have this at least coming so fast, because boy, this one came with a vengeance.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly the way I feel. It's like we really should be grateful, because it's like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We have finally reached the point where we have something to fight back with.
Yes.
We have this vaccine that we can use. And so it's really sad to see that this is the best we have, and yet people are not wanting it. And just because of misinformation, or just because of what has happened before. And so that's why it's really important for us to get on the education train and let people understand what's going on.
Right. Somebody asked a question, and somebody asked a question here, Doctor. And the question is, which company do you believe has the best vaccine? Before you respond to that, that question was asked to Dr. Fauci, I think yesterday or a couple of days ago, and he said, maybe even up to last week, he said, "Listen, his response was, and I'm not quoting verbatim, but his response was, I am not going to say which one is better or not, because the process, they come to the same thing. The names are different, but they use the same basic, the mRNA, as you said." And so he said he happened to take the Moderna, I think it was, but he said whichever one was at his facility, he would have taken it the very same way and as comfortable, because they both have 95% effectiveness, and the safety ratio is about the same. So in responding to that person's question, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, and exactly, and that I think is a great answer, because it's like whatever is there, you're going to take. Like, for example, I know there is maybe the next vaccine is going to come. They're talking about a 1-dose vaccine.
Right.
And so a lot of people would want that just because of convenience.
Yes.
You just have to go once instead of twice.
Over and done with, one shot gone.
Yeah. Right. And it's kind of the same way when you think of some drugs, like, they have generics and they have, these kind of things. And it's like people make decisions based on cost, and they work. And so you use it.
I think I see my wife make a point here, which I think is an important point. She says, it is tough to see how we are refusing something that could save our lives while others are running to get it. There are the people who can afford. Some of them are going behind the scenes and tipping off people to get it, so they can save their lives. The other tribes or the other nations or the other races are running to get it, lining up and spending a whole day to get it, while we are behind the scenes. I don't think I want to take that. I have too much questions in my mind. And so by the time we stop questioning our own selves, we die, our family died. And so we become more in the statistics of those who died than in the number of those who have taken the vaccine. Exactly.
And that's why it's really important for people to get the information. And just from experience, like sometimes I talk to people and I just ask them, it's like, are you planning to take the vaccine? And some people, they have made up their minds already, like, I'm really not thinking about it. And while I must be honest, some people are thinking like, okay, I want to take it, but I want many more people to take it before I take it. Let me see what's happening. And
not on the way.
And if I just give an example of that, for example, in some of the trials, like the large trials for vaccine, it's usually tens of thousands. It's never millions.
Right.
And now we've had millions of people who have taken these vaccines. So that's like, it's a whole lot more exposure.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to know what somebody else is waiting for. I hope they're not waiting for COVID.
Yeah, right.
As I said, I'd rather live with the vaccine than die with COVID. So I'm talking with Dr. Kenrick Semple. Oh my goodness, this time has run off so fast, and this is such a great conversation. I am looking forward to part 2, because I want to include syphilis and some more of these diseases. So let's see. There's a question here for you. Is the antibodies developed by the body post-COVID positive enough? Is the antibodies developed by the body post-COVID positive enough? I'm not sure how to respond to that.
Right, yeah, and that's a great question. And so, as I said, I still work in the medical field. I work in the blood bank. And so there was one study that is still ongoing, where for patients, and I'm pretty sure some of you have heard, like they would say for people who are recovered from COVID, they can go and they can donate their plasma so that other people can have it.
Right.
And so at the hospital where I work, they were part of that trial. So what that is, it's like if somebody got the infection, and their body would develop these antibodies. These are just these proteins that are ready to fight if the virus comes again. And so when they donate the plasma, so the plasma has all these proteins inside the antibodies. And so they would give that to another patient once they have a matching blood group. And from the study, while I haven't seen the result, but they're continuing it because it has worked in some patients.
Mm-hmm.
It has worked where they can receive the plasma from somebody who has received it. So to answer that question, I would say yes, it can be enough to basically prevent. I don't know if I should say prevent. At least it has been used to treat. So I would stop there as that.
And I think follow up on that question, I want another question for you. Follow up on that question. The other thing is, because of the shortness of the time, it is not known how long and how effective the antibody works, how long it works to prevent you reinfected.
Exactly. And that's a very important question. That's a very important question. And so, like every year we would take the flu vaccine, and the flu vaccine usually works,
Right.
I guess, for a year. And so we get a new one. And so right now it's really not known how long the immunity is going to last. How long are we going to be protected, those of us who have received the vaccine? So that's all still being worked out now with all these trials, everything.
And only time will tell that. My question for you, if you know, what are the levels or the numbers of the antibodies? For example, those who didn't know, I actually contracted the virus in March. So, and I didn't get my test positive, but I was sick, and eventually I got my antibody test, and my numbers were 19. So when I spoke with the gentleman who give me the result, and I asked what this number means, and he said, well, anything above 1 is positive. I mean, you had the virus. So mine was 19. I don't know. And I asked him, what's the highest number that you've ever seen? And he said the highest number was 29. So I don't know the scale of that, but do you have any knowledge?
Right. I'm not familiar with the scale, but I don't know. It sounds like if that's maybe like a raw figure. So I don't know exactly what it means. But with antibodies, normally it's done in titers.
Okay.
Like titers would actually give you, and that just means, like you can kind of dilute it down and to see how far it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then just from those raw figures, I would think, well, if he says 29 is like the largest, and then you're 19, so I guess
maybe almost 2/3 of.
Yeah. Maybe you should have probably go to see if you could donate some plasma.
Oh wow, this is a very interesting conversation. And let me just suggest to all those who are watching on YouTube and Facebook, if you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would suggest you subscribe tonight and hit the bell, so when I talk to Dr. Semple the next time, you will be notified once we go live. So that's an opportunity for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So once we go live again, you will know that he's gone live. And maybe who knows who's going to talk with the doctor next time. Because on these Wednesday evenings, I want to make it a regular thing to talk to some professionals every Wednesday and sometimes Friday, because there's so many things that we really want to talk about. My goodness. Anybody else with a question? Somebody say here, and this may be your Dr. Kenny, I was having allergic reaction for some time now, and I did the test, but the result shows that I am not allergic to any, but still have the allergic reaction. I'm not sure. What is the I still take the vaccine? Also, the person did take the vaccine.
Right. Oh no, they're asking, can I still take the vaccine? Oh yeah, and that's a very important question. And so yes, let me address that. It's for anybody who takes the vaccine. Of course, they would normally ask you if you've ever been allergic to anything or any vaccine or anything. They want to have that information, because when you receive the vaccine, they actually have you sit around for at least 15 minutes. And that's basically just to look to see if you develop any kind of allergic reactions, because most reactions are going to come up at that time. Some of the more, like the rare and the more severe allergic reactions would come up at least within like an hour or so. But for that question, I would definitely ask a medical professional, like a primary care physician, for them to decide whether you should take the vaccine or not. And the reason why I'm saying that, because when these studies were done, they specifically did not include people who have had previous allergic reactions.
Mhm.
Those people were not included in any of these trials. And so that's why they would always want to know whether you've had an allergic reaction. And so that's a very important question, but I would definitely check with a physician about that. Let them decide whether you should take it or not.
All right. Is anybody else coming with any question before we wrap up part one? This has been such a good conversation. And man, you've done a great job so far on your debut. Okay,
Oh,
so
thank you. Yeah.
oh wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody wants to ask a question to the doctor? Wow, when I know, man, listen, I've seen some uh, messages that people are saying this was good information. They appreciate it, and you're getting congratulations for your knowledge. Here's a question: what about the? Oh, so somebody did ask that question. Let me see that. They said, "What about the deaths as a result of the vaccine?" Let me see the longer version of the question because somebody asked that question, Sister Marlene. What about the people who have died as a result of the vaccine? Died as a result. I think there may be one person who died. Anybody have died? Or I think may one or two people may have gotten sick. Does anybody die?
Right. So there is and I wouldn't want to really kind of like talk much about this because it hasn't been information that I have verified or so. But I've heard in one of the European countries there were several people from a nursing home who were very weak and they'd given them, and so they had that. But I have not actually verified it. It was like a CNN report.
Mhm.
But
I-
what
Okay, go ahead.
Right, but what I wanted to say with that, it's like when the trial was actually done, uh, they did not actually do the trial in people who were severely ill. And so that's the thing. Normally, when trials are conducted, they usually include kind of like a representation from each of the groups who would be taking the product, the vaccine. But this was not done. For example, like for kids 15 and under,
Right.
they were not included. Pregnant women were not included. So because these segments of the population were not included, there isn't really data, any information as to know whether the vaccine is really good, whether it's safe in those populations.
And another thing that I have found out is that like any vaccination for that matter. For example, there are some people who can't take penicillin
Yeah.
because of the reaction. They're allergic to it, and it could kill you. So if you take it, so those questions are being asked. My guess, my wondering, and I don't know, I'm not a scientist or a physician, but what I heard is that people with certain underlying issues or on certain medication should not take it unless it is known by the person who's giving them the vaccine that they have this, and there should be education knowledge enough to know that what the reaction might be. So
Yeah.
that could have been the reason, not just from the vaccine itself,
Yeah.
but because of other underlying issues that they
Exactly.
did not relate well with.
Right, exactly. And that's why even though they ask you these questions, like for the person who would ask about a previous allergic reaction, it's
Right.
like as soon as I see that, I would say at least speak with a physician, speak with your physician before and let them know, because they'll be able to look at the history and they would be able to say whether you should take it or not. And so it's like if I am allergic to anything or I've had any history of any allergic reaction, I would definitely call up my physician, discuss that before I go to take the vaccine.
This question is doctor, if a person have underlying conditions, can they take the vaccine? I'm not the doctor, but I could maybe answer that to myself. But I'm going to give you the chance to answer that.
Right. And so with those cases, those are things that they would have to decide. They would have to discuss
Discuss with
with
the
their physician. Yeah, they have to definitely discuss that with their physician. Once they have underlying conditions, they should discuss that with their physicians instead of just going. I would say right now, healthy people, no history of allergic reactions and all of that, they should be fine. But in terms of any underlying condition, I would definitely advise them to seek information from their physician.
The question, yeah, and I would, again, for me, I think people with underlying issues, depending on what they are even more vulnerable to the
Yeah.
to the COVID, to the disease itself. So they should really run to the physician to find out how do I, get an understanding of this, because am I the benefit versus the laws are the threat. Which
Right.
one do I weigh out more? I'm just hearing somebody saying here that 6 people died from the vaccination, including one young Florida doctor. I don't know that
Yeah.
information, so I can't verify that or speak on that. I don't know exactly how and why and what the causes are. I would have to see the information to really speak on that, but I have not heard that widely on the news, and I'm a news freak.
Mhm.
Wow. Any more question? We're going to take one more question. Dr. Semple is here with us. And again, I'm just reminding everybody that this is part one. We're going to have part two very, very soon. But if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, I would suggest you do that right now and hit the bell so that you'll be notified once we say we're going, once we put it on, or once we go live. You'll know that Dr. Semple is on with me. Man, this has just been amazing. I so greatly appreciate your expertise and your willingness to share this time. This has been amazing, and I'm sure we have gotten a lot of feedback already on this dialogue. People are pleased of it, and I can't wait to see the reaction and how people are going to be looking forward to the next time. We have a lot to talk about, but now that you got your foot wet, now you know exactly what to anticipate and what to look for the next time when we join again for some of these other diseases. And just FYI, I really want to talk about syphilis and to get an understanding of it. A lot of misinformation are on social media. That's what somebody, my wife, says here. And doctor, at what age group can take the vaccine?
Oh, yes.
One, the only anywhere from 16 that is been approved, anywhere from above 16, and I think one is 16, one is 18, right? One of the
Right. And most um the the Pfizer is 16 and above.
and the other one is 18, I think, right?
Yes, you're
Right.
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 Yeah. So
And
that's
so anywhere between 16 and 200.
Mhm.
Anywhere between 16 and 200, you can take the vaccine once it becomes available. All right, Betty Harding, and all of you who have joined in, thank you so much. I really appreciate it very, very much. My wife is saying, Dr. Semple, that she's so proud of you. I don't know if
Oh,
you,
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I
Yes.
have, and Beverly's watching from Guyana. You're home, right? And thank you, everybody. This is just the beginning. Again, I'm looking forward to part two, and I'm going to make sure it's not too long from now, so that it doesn't go out of people's mind, that they will be anticipating the next time. So I'm going to tell everybody who is watching and who will watch this even after we finish the live, look out when I'm going to be talking to Dr. Semple about part two, because if you think round one is good, I can't wait for round two. God bless you, my friend. God bless you, my brother. God bless you, friends, and everybody. Have yourselves a wonderful night, a good week. Stay safe. Don't forget to protect yourself as much as you can. Wear your mask, stay distance, do as much as you can. Wash your hands, sanitize. Do your best to protect yourself. And if you get the opportunity, let me just suggest, if you get the opportunity to take the vaccine, please, for your own good and the good of those around you, don't delay. I would rather die with live with the vaccine than die with COVID. That's me. And I'm walking around with my sleeve almost up virtually, just waiting for somebody to say, at your age, you are ready. Come right in. I'm in. I am all in. But until next time, this is Let's Talk with the Doc. And thank you, Doc, for talking with the Doc. And the Doc talking with the Doc as we so thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bishop. God bless.
Great, man. Thank you, man. I'm looking forward to seeing you the next time.
Amen. And thank you all.
Audrey Semple. Who's Audrey Semple? Who's Audrey Semple?
Oh, that's my sister. That's my sister in Turks and Caicos.
Watching from the Turks and Caicos Island. Thank you, Audrey, for tuning in. Of course, your brother is in the line. Why wouldn't you be watching from wherever you are? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. All right. God bless.
Sister Marlene said this was top notch.
Top notch. Oh wow.
All right. And see the professor. When she said that, I take it with more than a grain of salt.
Oh wow. Well, that's good.
All right. Watching from Canada.
Canada.
All right. I appreciate everybody joining in. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. And everybody, make sure your lineup, subscribe to my YouTube channel, check out my podcast at Grace Without Borders, link up with me on Facebook, wherever you are. So once I post something, you'll be right there with me to know what's happening, because something is always happening and there is a lot more to come. We are just getting started on Let's Talk with the Doc. Until next time, see you.
All right. Thank you.
Blessings.
All right.